Hi, it's Olivia, and do you remember way back in the day at the end of 2019, when we were all still excited for what 2020 would bring? That is around when I asked myself just how helpful are self-help books, and 17 books and many months later, I have a lot to talk about. I read a bunch of these books, tried their methods and advice, and even did some research. I will include timestamps somewhere over here. Now I'm talking specifically about if these books were helpful to me. I'm not exactly reviewing them, but if you want to know my detailed thoughts of each of these books, I have a review linked for each of them on my Goodreads, which is in the description. And what I deem helpful is very subjective. Let's quickly talk about the world of self-help. It is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and for some people, these are the only books that they'll mainly pick up. They'll find anything on productivity, finance and relationships, you name it. On the other hand, you have people who avoid these books and have major criticisms with the genre. I have to admit to being more on the skeptic side too. Also, when I thought of this video, it was around the same time these statistics were floating around for diversity in children's books. And I wondered, what do these statistics look like for the self-help genre? And I couldn't find any, so I thought, fine, I'll do it myself. So I went to my local Barnes & Noble pre-pandemic. Wow, what a time when you could sit in the cafe without masks. I located every shelf that was labeled personal development, which was about 6 shelves that had over 500 books. And then I cataloged all 500 of these books, and I also tracked the demographics for gender and race for them. I found that 58% were written by women, 42% by men, and 85% were written by white authors, followed by 6% Asian or Pacific Islander authors, 3% Black authors, 1% bi or multiracial authors, and the number was so small for Hispanic and Latino authors that it rounded at 0%, and 6% for unknown when race couldn't be identified. This is not a perfect study by any means, but it's still very telling. Disappointed but not surprised. The publishing industry needs to do better. Unrelated, if the trendy title for young adult books is a blank of blank and blank, then the trendy title for self-help books is main title followed by an extremely long subtitle. There's so many that have these really lengthy sentences. So let's get started with the first category, which is books I read prior to thinking of this video. So that includes The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F by Mark Manson and Being Mortal by Atul Gawande, and I included this category so I can talk about how these books hold over time. Are they like motivational speeches or TED Talks where you feel inspired for a day or an hour or a few minutes and then you forget about them? I read The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F around this time last year, and it's one of the most popular modern self-help books, and I have to be honest, I had to pull out my notes from when I was reading it to even remember the details. It's been a year and this book doesn't cross my mind, but this is also part of a group I'll call the edgy books, the books that have explicit language in the title, and then they're kind of marketed as anti-self-help or anti-cliche. And I read Being Mortal back in 2018, didn't realize it was a self-help book, but Google says that it is. This is by a surgeon who talks about how modern medicine has impacted our view of mortality and end-of-life care in nursing homes and hospice care. We get uncomfortable with these topics, but I would honestly recommend this to most people because we're all gonna face it, and also there's a good chance you might have a relative who is elderly or sick or terminally ill, and I just think that the perspective this book gives is so valuable. I'd say this was helpful, and side note, there is an underrated TED Talk called Stories from a Home for Terminally Ill Children, which reminded me of this book except for end-of-life care with kids, which again, no one wants to talk about these things, but it's one of the most moving TED Talks I've ever seen, so I'd recommend it. The next category is for books on productivity and habits. Make Time is by Jake Knapp and John Zaraski, who both worked at Google, and their book has over 87 different strategies to making time in your day, and they use a 4-step system: highlight, laser, reflect, and energize. And it's very DIY, so you kind of pick and choose what strategies work for you. I tried their phone tactic because I've been trying to get off my phone and I've never seen this before. You move all of your apps off the first page, so when you open your phone, it's a blank first page. This didn't really work for me because I got used to just swiping, but I keep it like this because I like seeing my Interstellar wallpaper in its full glory. I also tried their daily highlight tactic, which is a way to prioritize. So at the very least, if there's just one thing you get done in the day, it's your highlight and you can feel good about that. I also tried their personal sprint, which is basically for several days in a row, making the same highlight. So there's this project I was working on, and so every single day I made that my highlight, and I honestly made a ton of progress. Also, not sure if it was related to this book, but I have been making an effort to do at least 30 minutes of yoga in the morning. Past month, I think I've done it almost every single day. But anyway, I think this book was helpful. Atomic Habits by James Clear is all about the importance of small improvements and how they compound to big results over time. He also has a 4-step breakdown for creating habits, which follows the 4 laws of behavior change. So you're supposed to make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. One tactic I followed was the habit tracker, because I realized I already had one included in my planner for this year, which I think is why it's been my favorite planner. I love that thing. I include the habits most important to me, and I love visually seeing how well my week is going. Some weeks look really good. I like this number of check marks is really good, and then other weeks are not that great. And I think this book had some helpful ideas. And next we have The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up by Marie Kondo. And I thought I was an organized person, but still I ended up getting rid of a ton of stuff. I really love her main idea of keeping what sparks joy. That's really stuck with me. I also like her method of organizing by category, and I forced my sister to join with me as we one day just did a huge tidying of our rooms. We pulled out all of our clothes and decided which ones sparked joy and which didn't. We dealt with our papers, we dealt with our junk drawers. I didn't think I was gonna get to mine, but I did. And we also tried her folding method. It's been about a month since doing this, and my drawers still look really nice with the fancy folding. She has a whole section on books, which I was going to skip because I really didn't feel like it, but I decided just to go through with it. I'm no stranger to unhauling books, so I didn't think I'd have much to get rid of, and somehow I still came out with over 40 books to get rid of. I was really good at hiding the books I didn't care about. This book was helpful to me, and my sister said that she is slightly more organized, but still slightly messy. Next, we have the part self-help, part memoir books, and I'll start with Girl Wash Your Face by Rachel Hollis, which is another hugely popular book about getting past the lies that we tell ourselves. And yeah, this was useless to me. I thought this book was bad and like the epitome of what I imagine people think of when they mock this genre. I know that's harsh, but I have a separate video review of what I didn't like about this one. So there's that. Then I picked up More Than Enough by Elaine Welteroth, who was known for becoming editor-in-chief at Teen Vogue, and she was only the second person of African American heritage in Condé Nast's like 100 plus year history. And so her journey and her efforts were really inspiring, and she never said to do so, but for some reason I felt compelled to like finally put together a little art portfolio. Yeah, I read Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Lori Gottlieb, and this is about Lori's experiences as a therapist who sees her own therapist, and I can't help but hope that there is a therapist out there who has recommended this book to their patient. So, you know, a therapist recommending a book about a therapist who goes and sees her therapist. Therapistception. This one didn't do too much for me, but I imagine it would be very helpful to many others. And there was a quote that I really liked that said, maybe happiness is sometimes, and it probably makes more sense in the context of the book. And finally, I read Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes. If you have watched Grey's Anatomy, Scandal, How to Get Away with Murder, you know of her. She is the writer and or producer of all 3 of those hit shows. This is about her deciding to say yes to things, even as a more anxious introvert. Not sure how helpful this was, but I did like some of the ideas, like saying yes to accepting praise and compliments without diminishing them, because that people tend to do that, like you're like, oh no, I don't deserve that kind of thing. or saying yes to downtime. I really like some of those ideas. And I also think this would make a good gift to like recent graduates like me. I just graduated in May. She even includes an entire graduation speech that she gave a few years ago. The next category is research-based or part science books. And let's start with Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. He is a professor of neuroscience and psychology, and right away this was helpful because after just a few pages, do you ever Google symptoms that you have when you're sick and the internet basically tells you that you have any number of diseases or that you're gonna die? This felt like that, except the answer to the problems is quality sleep. And the reason for those problems is not getting enough. Prior to reading this, my sleep habits were absolute garbage. I mean, consistently getting up at 3 a.m., even on days I'd have to get up between 6 and 7 a.m. I just never made an effort to prioritize my sleep, and I'm a night owl. But learning so much of the science really motivated me to put in some effort, so I've been trying to go to sleep. What works best for me is going around 11:30 p.m., which is still insanely early to my 3 a.m. days, and getting up between 7 and 8 a.m. I'm also a wild dreamer, and since working on my sleep, I can recall more of my dreams and for longer periods, so much that I've even started keeping a little dream journal. And I can't say dream journal without thinking of Shark Boy and Lava Girl.
He ruined my dream journal! I did not! Mr. Electric, send him to the principal's office and have him expelled!
Next is Mindset by Carol Dweck, and I was already familiar with this idea of a growth versus fixed mindset. In a growth mindset, you believe you have the potential to change certain traits, and in a fixed mindset, you believe that certain traits are fixed, like intelligence or ability. And this is huge in US education and child development. Ideas like the power of the word yet, as in, I can't do art yet. You'll see that a lot in elementary schools. But unfortunately, this book was not my favorite. It was really repetitive after that like main idea. And it was also real. I wish I read a more revised edition because the more recent growth mindset stuff wasn't in this because this was published, I think, way back in 2006. But yeah, sad. I like the concept, but the book itself wasn't that helpful. Then we have Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World of People That Can't Stop Talking by Susan Cain. She was an attorney. I believe she got her degree from Harvard, and this was a very well-researched book. I think it had over 250 references looking at the introversion extroversion spectrum, but specifically on introverts and how their traits still contribute greatly to society, even if society may not think so. I definitely consider myself an introvert, so while reading this, I just kept saying to myself, like, yep, that's me. I thought this book was really helpful for the understanding that I gained. Last in this category is The Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown. I used to work at my college's gym, and twice a year we had these big training weeks, and the final day was like a big personal development day, and the last training was entirely based on this book. All of the workshops were based on the guideposts in this book, so that's where I got the book too. They gave it out to us. Brene's research focuses on shame and belonging, and this book is all about like cultivating self-worth. There was a couple ideas I liked. They weren't exactly new, but I liked seeing them talked about. Like the idea of letting go of scarcity in favor of gratitude, or letting go of comparison. I like these ideas, though I can't say how helpful. I don't know if I'd say this book was super helpful to me. I only had one book in the next category, spirituality, which was The Four Agreements by Miguel Ruiz. I almost didn't include this one because I know I'm in the minority on this one. It's a very well-loved book, very short. I believe it's under 100 pages, so you can read it very quickly. But it just didn't resonate with me. I think I didn't like the examples that were used, but the agreements are to be impeccable with your word, don't take anything personally, don't make assumptions, and always do your best. And side note, sometimes these books, the synopsis tells you the main ideas from the book, like this one, the four agreements are listed in the synopsis. When books do this, it reminds me of YouTubers who post videos with X number of things, and then the top comment just lists everything mentioned in the video, so then people don't have to watch the video. And the final category is other, where I couldn't decide where to put these books. I finally read Outliers. It's listed as self-help sometimes, but it's more of a analysis of what contributes to success. This is written by Malcolm Gladwell, and I thought it was interesting. His mother is also an author from Jamaica, Joyce Gladwell. This book tries to demystify the idea that success purely comes from hard work and talent. Success happens with talent and hard work, yes, but, and this whole book is about the but, it's where hard work and talent meet opportunity. And I just really value the perspective that this book gives. I also read Creative Quest by Questlove. This is all about the creative process and creativity. If you don't know Questlove, he is the drummer for the band The Roots, and currently they work with Jimmy Fallon. And this was my most recent read, and honestly there's not too much that I have since taken away from this book. I don't really have much to say about this one right now, but it did make me want to pick up more books on creativity. And book number 17, which is one of the earliest and remains to be one of the most popular self-help books, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I was pleasantly surprised by this because I was expecting, since it was published in 1936, I was expecting it to be dated and boring, but the principles are all about basic human relations and decency. He uses a lot of entertaining examples for all walks of life, so business, relationships, school setting. Good communication and human decency remains such an important part of our life, so I see why it holds well over time. I like certain principles like giving honest and sincere appreciation, and also remembering and saying people's names correctly. That's something I still make an effort to do. I always try to make sure I look up author names because, I mean, otherwise I just blow it off because I'm being lazy, and I have been trying to change that. So we've made it to the end. Time for my final thoughts. If you were keeping track, I believe 8 or 9 of the 17 I considered helpful. Make of that what you will. I realized the best ones for me were those that were research-based or those that had actionable advice. And I also started to wonder, at what point do these books just really start to kind of say the same stuff? I don't think it'd be all that beneficial to me to read 50 books on productivity or happiness, because at some point I just don't think they're going to be all that different from one another. I definitely still prefer shorter books. I think that's still what I think is a major flaw with this genre, is sometimes you have a really good idea but it's stretched out to fill a book. Like, so maybe it would have been better as a blog post or an article. So that's it. I would love to know your thoughts on anything. Do you think that self-help books are helpful? Have they impacted your life at all? Do you avoid them? Whatever it is, comment down below, and I will see you in another video. Bye.